At some point, you started telling yourself something changed. Not in a moment you can point to. Not in a clear before and after. Just gradually. Quietly. Over time. You don't feel things the same way anymore. That thought didn't arrive all at once. It formed slowly. In the background. Through repetition. Through small moments that didn't land the same way they used to. Through things that once stayed, and now don't. Through reactions that once expanded, and now stop early. You sit there. And if you pay attention, you can feel the difference. There was a time when things didn't stay small. They didn't stay contained. They didn't stay within a range you could manage easily. A conversation would turn into something deeper. A moment would stay longer than expected. A feeling would grow past the point you could control. It didn't just show up. It expanded. It pulled your attention. It shifted your state. It stayed with you. Longer than you wanted. Deeper than you expected. And it wasn't always manageable. It wasn't always something you could regulate. Sometimes it crossed a line. Sometimes it went too far. Sometimes it cost more than you wanted to give. Now, it doesn't. Something happens. And you notice it. You register it. You're aware of it. But it doesn't expand. It doesn't deepen. It doesn't take you with it. It just stops. Early. Before it becomes anything more. Before it becomes something that stays. Before it becomes something you have to deal with. You sit there. And you don't analyze that directly. You don't stop and question it. You just notice, things don't hit the same. They don't stay as long. They don't reach the same depth. And from that, a conclusion forms. I'm better now. I'm not like before. I don't get affected the same way. And that feels right. Because compared to before, this is easier. Before, things were heavier. More intense. More consuming. They didn't stay in one place. They didn't stay manageable. They didn't stay within control. They pulled you further than you wanted to go. So compared to that, this feels like progress. It feels like something improved. You're more stable. More composed. More controlled. Less reactive. Less pulled into things. You can move through your day without getting caught in something that takes over. And from the outside, that looks like growth. It looks like clarity. It looks like boundaries. It looks like standards. You've learned what to engage with. What not to engage with. What deserves your time. What deserves your energy. What deserves your attention. And everything else, you leave alone. Not because you can't handle it. Because you don't need it. Because it's not worth it. Because it's too much for what it gives you. And that sounds reasonable. It sounds grounded. It sounds like you've figured something out. You sit there. And now your life feels cleaner. Simpler. More intentional. You've removed things that complicate it. You've removed things that drain you. You've removed things that don't feel aligned. Everything stays within range. Everything stays manageable. Everything stays fine. And that word matters. Fine. Not overwhelming. Not chaotic. Not consuming. Just stable. Predictable. Controlled. You lean back slightly. And that's where the illusion settles in. Because nothing feels broken. Nothing feels missing in an obvious way. Nothing feels like something you need to fix. It just feels like this is how things are now. Like this is what it means to have grown. To have stabilized. To have figured things out. You sit there. And that interpretation becomes your baseline. You don't question it. Why would you? It feels better than before. It feels safer. It feels more controlled. It feels like you've moved past something. But that's not what happened. You're not numb. You're selective. That line doesn't contradict your experience. It explains it. You didn't lose the ability to feel. You removed the situations that require you to feel deeply. You didn't become less emotional. You reduced the conditions that would make emotion expand. You didn't change what you feel. You changed what you allow to reach you. And that difference is subtle. Because it doesn't feel like avoidance. It feels like choice. It feels like preference. It feels like you're being intentional about what you allow into your life. You don't say, I don't want to feel this. You say, I don't need this. It's not worth it. It's too much. And those statements feel true. They feel justified. They feel like decisions someone stable would make. Someone who has learned. Someone who doesn't go into things blindly anymore. You lean forward slightly. And now the shift becomes clear. You're not reacting less. You're entering less. You're not feeling less. You're stepping into fewer things that would make you feel more. That's the difference. That's where it changed. It didn't start inside you. It started in what you allow. In what you engage with. In what you follow through on. In what you let continue past the surface. You sit there. And now the mechanism sharpens. You didn't control the emotion. You controlled the conditions. You adjusted your environment. You adjusted your exposure. You adjusted the kinds of interactions you let develop. You adjusted the points where something could deepen. You adjusted the moments where something could become real. You adjusted everything before it had the chance to reach you fully. And you did that consistently. Quietly. Automatically. Until it became your default. Your way of moving through things. Your way of structuring your life. You lean back slowly. And the final line lands clean. It's not that nothing reaches you anymore. It's that you've built a life where very little is allowed to try. If this still looked like avoidance, you would see it. If it still felt like pulling away, you would question it. If it still showed up as hesitation, as something obvious, you wouldn't trust it. But it doesn't. It doesn't look like avoidance anymore. That's what makes it difficult to recognize. Because nothing about it feels like you're running from something. It feels like you're choosing. Choosing better. Choosing carefully. Choosing intentionally. You sit there. And everything about it sounds right. You don't engage with things that feel complicated. You don't go into conversations that don't feel necessary. You don't pursue connections that feel uncertain. You don't stay in situations that feel unclear. And none of that feels like avoidance. It feels like clarity. You lean back slightly. And now the language becomes important. You call it boundaries. Standards. Self-respect. Knowing your worth. Protecting your energy. And those words matter. Because they don't feel defensive. They feel strong. They feel stable. They feel like something you built after learning what happens when you don't have them. You sit there. And that's why you trust it. Because it's not random. It's not impulsive. It's not reactive. It's consistent. Measured. Clean. It doesn't create chaos. It prevents it. And that feels like maturity. Like you figured something out that you didn't understand before. You lean forward slightly. And the pattern becomes clearer. You don't say, I'm avoiding this. You say, this isn't aligned. This isn't worth my time. This isn't what I'm looking for. And those statements feel true. They feel grounded. They feel like decisions someone stable would make. Someone who has learned from past experience. Someone who doesn't repeat mistakes. You sit there. And nothing about that feels wrong. Nothing about that feels like something you need to question. It feels like refinement. Like you've simplified your life. Like you've removed what doesn't fit. You lean back slightly. And that's where it becomes harder to see. Because the surface logic still holds. You are choosing. You are being intentional. You are not going into things blindly. All of that is real. But what you're filtering for is not just alignment. It's control. Control over how far something can go. Control over how much something can affect you. Control over whether something reaches a depth you don't want to enter. You sit there. And that shift is subtle. Because it doesn't feel like control. It feels like preference. It feels like you're simply selecting what fits your life. But what you're actually doing is selecting what stays within range. Anything that could move you beyond that range, you don't step into. Not consciously. Not deliberately. Automatically. You lean forward slightly. And now the behavior becomes visible. A conversation starts to go somewhere real. It begins to open. To move past the surface. And you feel it. That moment where it could deepen. And right there, you adjust it. You lighten it. You shift it slightly away from where it was going. Not in a way that breaks it. Not in a way that makes it obvious. Just enough to keep it from becoming something more. You sit there. And then it happens again. Someone asks something real. Something that would require you to actually be seen. To respond from somewhere deeper. And you answer. But you don't open. You respond without letting it reach you. You stay clear. You stay composed. You stay within range. And that feels like control. It feels like you handled it well. It feels like you did the right thing. You lean back slightly. And then it shows up again. A connection begins. Something that could grow. Something that could become real. And you notice it. That early stage. That early shift. That moment where something starts to matter. And instead of following it, you slow it down. You reduce it. You keep it from building too quickly. Too deeply. Too far. You tell yourself, let's not complicate this. Let's keep it simple. Let's not go too far. And that sounds right. It sounds measured. It sounds like clarity. But it does something else. It keeps everything within range. You sit there. And it shows up again. You write something. Something honest. Something that would actually say what you're thinking. You type it out. You read it. And then, you delete it. Not because it's wrong. Not because it doesn't make sense. Because it goes too far. Because it would change something. Because it would open something you don't want to open. So you replace it. With something lighter. Something neutral. Something that doesn't shift anything. You lean back slowly. And now the pattern becomes undeniable. You don't avoid life. You avoid depth. That's the difference. You still show up. You still engage. You still move through your day. Nothing about your life looks empty. Nothing about it looks withdrawn. Nothing about it looks like avoidance. But nothing goes too far. Nothing reaches a point where it could fully become something. You sit there. And now the structure becomes clear. You've built a way of moving through life that keeps everything within range. Within control. Within something you can manage. And because it looks like clarity, you trust it. Because it looks like boundaries, you protect it. Because it looks like standards, you reinforce it. You lean forward slightly. And the final shift lands clean. This doesn't feel like something you need to change. It feels like something you've chosen. And that's why it's hard to see. Because it doesn't look like avoidance anymore. It looks like the way you've decided to live. None of this happens in one moment. There isn't a single decision where everything changes. There isn't a point where you choose this as a lifestyle. It doesn't work that way. It builds. Quietly. Through small decisions that don't look like anything on their own. You sit there. And each moment feels separate. Unconnected. Insignificant. A conversation starts to open, and you adjust it. Not in a way that breaks the flow. Not in a way that feels obvious. Just enough to keep it from going further than you want it to go. You don't think about that. You don't analyze it. You just do it. And then it's over. Nothing feels off. Nothing feels like something you need to revisit. So you move on. You lean back slightly. And then it happens again. Someone asks something real. Something that would require you to actually be seen. To actually respond from somewhere deeper. And you answer. But you don't open. You give something back, without letting it reach you. It sounds complete. It sounds appropriate. But it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't deepen the moment. And again, that feels fine. You sit there. And then it shows up somewhere else. A moment appears. Something that could grow. Something that could become something more. And you feel that. That early signal. That early shift that this could go further. And instead of following it, you slow it down. You reduce it. You keep it from building too quickly. Too deeply. Too far. You tell yourself, let's keep this simple. Let's not complicate this. Let's not go too far. And again, it feels right. It feels measured. It feels controlled. So you trust it. You lean forward slightly. And then it happens in a quieter way. You write something. Something honest. Something that would actually say what you're thinking. You type it out. You read it. And then, you delete it. Not because it's wrong. Not because it doesn't make sense. Because it would go further. Because it would change something. Because it would open something you don't want to open. So you replace it. With something lighter. Something neutral. Something that doesn't move anything. You sit there. And that moment passes. Like all the others. Small. Contained. Unremarkable. But it doesn't stay separate. That's the part you don't see. You lean back slowly. And now the pattern becomes clearer. These moments don't disappear. They accumulate. They layer. They reinforce each other. You don't follow it. So it ends. You don't continue it. So it doesn't become anything. You don't let it expand. So it never has the chance to. Not once. Repeated. So it doesn't become anything more. And each of those decisions shapes the next one. Shapes what happens next. Shapes what's even possible. You sit there. And over time, something shifts. Not in what you're doing. In what your life starts to look like. Because these decisions don't stay isolated. They connect. They form a direction. You lean forward slightly. And now the structure becomes visible. You begin to move through life in a very specific way. You don't follow things that would require depth. You don't stay in moments that would expand. You don't allow interactions to reach a point where they would become real. And that doesn't feel like a system. It feels natural. Because you've repeated it enough times that it no longer feels like a choice. It feels like how things are. You sit there. And now it goes further. You don't notice it happening. Because nothing breaks. Nothing feels wrong. That's why it builds. You begin to structure your time around this. Not in an obvious way. Not in a forced way. But consistently. You stay occupied. Not chaotically. Not reactively. Just enough to avoid empty space. Because empty space is where things appear. Where something can expand without being filtered first. Where something can reach you before you have time to contain it. So you fill it. With tasks. With movement. With structure. With things that keep everything within range. You lean back slightly. And the pattern deepens. You choose environments that feel predictable. That feel stable. That don't require too much of you. That don't pull you into something uncertain. You choose people who don't push too far. Who don't ask too much. Who don't take things to a level you don't want to go. You choose interactions that stay within range. That don't shift too quickly. That don't require too much from you. And all of that feels intentional. It feels like you've refined your life. Like you've removed what doesn't fit. Like you've created something stable. But underneath that, you've created something else. A life that doesn't require depth. You sit there. And now the accumulation becomes undeniable. It's not one moment. It's all of them. Stacked. Layered. Reinforced. Until your experience starts to change. Not because life changed. Because what you allow changed. You lean forward slightly. And the final shift lands clean. Your life doesn't feel smaller because there's less in it. It feels smaller because less is allowed to fully happen. You sit there. And it doesn't feel constructed. It feels real. It feels like this is just how things are now. Because you've been moving this way long enough, that it no longer feels like a pattern. It feels like reality. You lean back slowly. And the closing line lands. It didn't happen once. You built it. One small decision at a time. If this felt wrong, you would stop. If it created obvious damage, you would question it. If it made your life worse, you would change it. But it doesn't. It feels right. That's what makes it hard to see. Because nothing about it feels like a mistake. Nothing about it feels like something you need to fix. It feels like something you learned. Something you earned. Something that came from experience. You sit there. And if you trace it back, you can feel where it came from. There was a time when you didn't do this. When you didn't filter things this way. When you didn't stop things early. When you let things go further. Deeper. Longer. And it cost you. Not always in one moment. Not always in one clear event. But enough times, that your system learned something. That going all the way into something, wasn't always safe. Wasn't always stable. Wasn't always something you could recover from easily. You sit there. And those experiences don't disappear. They don't stay as clear memories. But the effect remains. A threshold. A limit. A point where your system recognizes, this goes too far. This costs too much. This isn't something we repeat. You lean back slightly. And that's where the adjustment began. Not as a decision. Not as a strategy. As a response. The next time something started to go there, you didn't follow it. You slowed it down. You reduced it. You kept it within a range you could manage. And that worked. That's the part that matters. It worked. You didn't get overwhelmed. You didn't lose control. You didn't get pulled into something that took more than you could give. You stayed stable. You stayed functional. You stayed in control. So your system learned. Quietly. Without language. Without explanation. This is better. This is safer. This is how we do this now. You sit there. And that's why you trust it. Not because you analyzed it. Because you experienced it working. You experienced the difference. Between going all the way in, and stopping early. Between being pulled into something, and staying within range. Between losing control, and keeping it. And that difference felt significant. It felt like relief. You lean forward slightly. And now the deeper layer becomes clearer. You didn't just learn what to avoid. You learned how to avoid it without it looking like avoidance. You learned how to keep things clean. Simple. Contained. Without breaking connection. Without creating conflict. Without making it obvious. You sit there. And that becomes your way of moving. You don't shut things down. You guide them. You don't reject things. You filter them. You don't withdraw. You adjust. You keep everything within a range that feels safe. That feels stable. That feels predictable. You lean back slowly. And because it works, you keep doing it. Again. And again. And again. Not because you're choosing it consciously. Because it feels correct. Because it feels like the right way to handle things. You sit there. And now the interpretation settles in. This doesn't feel like protection anymore. It feels like intelligence. Like awareness. Like emotional maturity. Like you figured something out that you didn't understand before. You believe, this is what growth looks like. This is what stability looks like. This is what control should feel like. And that belief matters. Because it reinforces the pattern. It turns adaptation into identity. It turns behavior into something you trust without questioning. You lean forward slightly. And the next layer becomes unavoidable. You're not just doing this. You believe this is who you are now. Someone who doesn't get pulled into things. Someone who doesn't let things go too far. Someone who knows when to stop. Someone who knows how to stay in control. And that identity feels solid. It feels earned. It feels like something you built after going through something difficult. So you protect it. You maintain it. You don't step outside of it. Even when part of you can feel something missing. You sit there. And that missing part is not loud. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't create urgency. It just shows up occasionally. In moments that feel flat. In moments that don't deepen. In moments that end too cleanly. In moments that don't stay. But those moments are easy to dismiss. Because everything else feels stable. Everything else feels controlled. Everything else feels right. You lean back slowly. And that's why this continues. Not because it's forced. Not because it's rigid. Because it feels correct. Because it feels like the best version of how to live. Because it keeps you safe from going back to something you don't want to experience again. You sit there. And the final line of this chapter lands clean. You don't question it, because it feels like the answer. Not the problem. By now, you can see it. Not as an idea. Not as something abstract. Clearly. You can see how it formed. How it started as a response. How it repeated. How it built itself into something consistent. Something reliable. Something that works. You can see the pattern. You can see the structure. You can see the way it shapes what you allow, and what you don't. What you follow, and what you stop. What you continue, and what you cut off early. You can see all of that. And still, it keeps running. You sit there. And that's the part that doesn't make sense. Because the logic feels simple. If something was built to protect you, then once you don't need protection anymore, it should stop. It should loosen. It should give you back access to what it once limited. But it doesn't. Not on its own. You lean back slightly. And the reason becomes clearer. This wasn't built through awareness. It wasn't built through conscious thought. It wasn't built through a decision you can just reverse. It was built through repetition. Through experience. Through moments that went too far, and left a mark strong enough that your system learned something without needing language. And anything built that way, doesn't ask if it's still needed. It doesn't check if the situation changed. It doesn't evaluate whether it still makes sense. It just runs. Because it worked before. You sit there. And now the difference becomes clear. You're not choosing this each time. You're continuing it. That's not the same thing. Choice feels active. Intentional. Something you step into. Continuation feels automatic. Immediate. Familiar. It happens before you even notice it. Before you even have time to question it. You lean forward slightly. And now the next layer settles in. Even when things are different now, you still respond the same way. Even when the situation is not what it used to be, you still reduce it. Still contain it. Still keep it within range. Because that's what your system expects. That's what it's trained to do. That's what it trusts. You sit there. And that's where the tension begins. Because now, it's no longer protecting you from something that's happening. It's protecting you from something that might happen. From something that could happen. From something that once happened and was enough to create a lasting adjustment. You lean back slowly. And that original moment, whatever it was, is not happening now. But the response to it still is. That's the shift. That's where it becomes visible. You sit there. And that response never got updated. It never got questioned. It never got reevaluated. Because nothing forced it to. Nothing disrupted it enough to make it visible as a pattern. So it stayed. Running in the background. Quietly. Consistently. Without interruption. You lean forward slightly. And now the next realization lands. You're not stuck like this. You're maintaining it. That line lands clean. Because it removes the idea that this is something happening to you. It replaces it with something harder. This is something you keep reinforcing. Not deliberately. Not consciously. But consistently. Through what you do. Through what you don't do. Through what you allow. Through what you stop. You sit there. And now the structure becomes undeniable. It doesn't stay because it's needed. It stays because you keep choosing the same point where everything stops. Again. And again. And again. You lean back slightly. And the repetition becomes clearer. It's not one big moment. It's all of them. The small ones. The quiet ones. The ones that don't feel like anything. Where you don't follow up. Don't continue. Don't say what you were about to say. Don't go where it could go. Each one feels insignificant. Each one feels justified. Each one feels like the right decision in that moment. But they don't stay separate. They accumulate. They reinforce the same pattern. The same stopping point. The same limit. You sit there. And now the system locks in. Not because it's necessary. Because it's uninterrupted. Because nothing changes in how you respond at the exact moment where it would need to change. You lean forward slightly. And now the deeper layer appears. Nothing forces it to change. So it doesn't. This doesn't stay because it's still protecting you. It stays because it's still being completed. The sequence runs the same way. Every time. Something begins. It starts to move. It approaches a certain depth. And then, it gets reduced. Contained. Stopped. Before it becomes anything more. That's the pattern. And it completes. Again. And again. And again. You lean back slowly. And now the final shift settles in. It's not the past that's holding this in place. It's the present. It's what keeps happening now. The same response. The same limit. The same stopping point. Repeated. Without interruption. You sit there. And the final line lands clean. It's not still here because you need it. It's still here because you keep completing it. There isn't a point where this resolves on its own. No moment where it fades naturally. No stage where it disappears because enough time has passed. Because this was never about time. It was never something waiting to be processed. It was never something that would dissolve once you understood it. You sit there. And now, you do understand it. You can see the pattern. You can see how it formed. You can see how it built. You can see how it continues. You can see how it shapes what you allow, and what you don't. And none of that changes it. Because awareness doesn't interrupt behavior. That line lands clean. Because it removes the last illusion. The idea that seeing something clearly is enough to stop it. It isn't. Not when the pattern runs before awareness even arrives. Not when the sequence completes itself automatically. You lean forward slightly. And now the moment becomes precise. Something begins. Not dramatically. Not intensely. Just the start of something. A conversation shifts. A moment opens. A feeling begins to form. Something moves just past the surface. And right there, you can feel it. The exact point where it always changes. Where it gets reduced. Where it gets redirected. Where it gets contained. Where it gets stopped before it becomes anything more. You've been here before. Every time. Without noticing. Without choosing. Just following the same sequence to the same end. You sit there. And now, for the first time, you can see it before it completes. You lean back slightly. And that's where everything is. Not in the past. Not in what happened before. Not in what created it. Right here. At the exact point where it would continue the way it always has. You don't need to become different. That's it. Not a strategy. Not a method. Not something you build. You stop doing the one thing that has always kept it in place. You sit there. And that feels unfamiliar. Because everything in you knows how to complete it. How to reduce it. How to redirect it. How to keep it within range. That's what you've practiced. That's what you trust. That's what has worked. You lean forward slightly. And now there are two directions. The familiar one, and the one that interrupts it. The familiar one is immediate. Clean. Controlled. You reduce it. You redirect it. You keep it within range. And everything stays stable. Everything stays predictable. Everything stays the same. The other direction doesn't feel like control. It feels like uncertainty. Because you don't know what happens next. You don't know how far it will go. You don't know what it will become. You don't know if it will cost you again. And that uncertainty is exactly what this pattern was built to avoid. You sit there. And that's why this doesn't change through effort. Because effort is still control. Still direction. Still interference. Still deciding how far something is allowed to go. You lean back slowly. And the final shift becomes clear. This doesn't open because you try to open it. It opens when you stop limiting it. It just hasn't been allowed to continue. You sit there. And the moment sharpens. Something starts. And instead of reducing it, you don't. You don't push it. You don't analyze it. You don't control it. You don't keep it within range. You just don't stop it the way you always have. And that's where it changes. Not because you did something new. Because you didn't do what you always do. You lean forward slightly. And the final layer settles in. This was never about becoming more emotional. It was about removing the limit that kept everything from becoming anything. You sit there. And now the truth lands fully. You didn't lose it. You stopped letting it happen. And it changes, when you stop maintaining that.